Hang on a second. Okay, there we go. All right, so we've got the format of the narrative and then the detail. So I'm going to kind of go through the narrative, uh, uh, progressing through it so that we can get to the detail, because I think the detail is going to offer more conversation for it than usual. So let me talk about where we are in this thing. Where we are is we're into the tribulation. We talked about Israel in the tribulation. You guys have talked about the rapture of the church. We've talked about the signs of the times being birth pangs that lead up to it. And we've even discussed in detail some of the signs that were currently seeming to be available. And we've looked at those, right? Yeah, we have. So we have gone to the tribulation beginning, which would be the peace pact signed by Antichrist. We talked about the Russian, Iran, Arab coalition invading Russian in Ezekiel 36 and 37. We talked about the adjacent nations and their demise that were in Psalms. So now we're going to look at the first half of the tribulation and the second half of the tribulation. So if you haven't come to the conclusion yet, you should, that the tribulation is really centered on Israel. We talked about that last time we met. It is about them coming back to be what they were called to be originally, and that is God's representative to all the nations, and they're evangelists. We see that in the 144,000 that are kept as remnants after the rapture of the church, and progressing from there, it's about conversion. The first half of the tribulation are about natural disasters that happen. The second half of the tribulation is more about humanity and evil escalating itself to create the problems and the martyrs that he creates. So kind of keep that in mind as I go through these. Now, if you want to stop me as we go through them. We'll talk about the Gentiles in the tribulation. Now, God's program with the Gentiles is that Israel had lost its favored position. So the gospel was preached to the Gentiles to make the Jews jealous that they might be saved. Romans 11:11. Since that time, Gentiles who place faith in Jesus become members of God's church. So the church is raptured. Those believing Gentiles are gone, as are believing Jews gone. So now we're talking about believers that come to faith after the rapture. And in looking at the discussions that appear in Genesis, in Daniel, in Revelation, the book of Revelation, these are the things that are talked about in there. The first Gentile prediction is talks about Noah's prophecy about the character of his three sons and the lines of the races to follow and repopulate the earth. So Noah, is not a Jew because there were no Jews then. Jews don't come to be identified until Abraham. So Noah is the Gentile, and as are his sons, and the world is repopulated with Gentiles coming from that line. So we have that, and then we have the judgments upon nations that are adjacent to Israel. We talked about that in Psalms. Babylon and Chaldea, Moses, Damascus, Egypt, Philistia and Tyre, Edom, Ammon, and Elam. Those are the names of the nations that were at the time. Now, obviously, they become Syria and Jordan and Iraq and those nations. Now they've got different names to them, but there are judgments against them, and the judgments show up in prophecy. Times of the Gentiles relates to the divine dealings with the Gentiles and a measurement of the period in which Jerusalem and its temple is under the control of the Gentiles, which in a lot of cases, that is Moses. I mean, that is Babylon, Assyria, Babylonians, Egypt. Those have taken control of the city of Jerusalem and the temples. Fourth is there's mentioned succession of monarchies, 4 world powers foreseen and revisited. In Daniel, he talks about the 4, and we've covered that a lot. So there's not a lot of problems in going through with that. Judgment of the Gentile nations that are fully anticipated in the Old Testament. Gentile nations in the lake of fire. That's the idea of final judgment, and Gentile nations and as the kingdom. So those things are mentioning of the Gentiles and their relationship to the tribulation and ultimately to the kingdom on earth. Now, Gentiles in the tribulation themselves, there's a divine program for the Gentile nations. It is about the conversion of them, which starts with and begins with and fulfills with the Jews being the ones who bring them to salvation. And that comes to fulfillment in the tribulation period. In order to have a clear picture of the tribulation, the subject and the body of prophecy needs to be kind of put into your mind. So it's a different framework from the framework we looked at with Israel. It's the framework of the Gentiles. So there's a different framework because there's not the history of the Old Testament to back up the Gentiles. The history of the Old Testament belongs to the Jews, remember? So consideration is given to events that are relative to the Jews. Look at Luke 21:24, and it says, they will fall by the edge of the sword and led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Times of the Gentiles being fulfilled is the times that they no longer have control over Jerusalem and the temple. Anybody have any questions so far? Remarks? Comments? Okay.
Hey, Danny,
yeah.
are you showing slides on there? I've got a black screen.
Yeah. Are you guys getting it?
No, we got black screen also.
All I have is just the main thing. What's it all about? It's not been advancing every time.
Really? What the heck is going on here? Oh, man. All right. Let me start over again. Let's see. I'm going to pause the. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Can you see that first Gentile prediction?
Changing. First Gentile prediction.
Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Cortile dei Gentili is Italian, and it means courtyard of the Gentiles. And the courtyard of the Gentiles actually is really kind of interesting what I found in researching that a little bit, reading it a little bit. It was a way for the Jews themselves, Pharisees and all, to isolate the Gentiles. And they were willing to set up a courtyard of the Gentiles to allow Gentiles to have access to certain portions of the temple, because they wanted servants and they wanted merchants and they wanted people that were selling things and giving away things. And their intent was to do that to accommodate the general Jewish population that came to the temple without using their own resources. When they came for the atonement, the Day of the Atonement, they had to have something to sacrifice. A lot of them came long distances, so they didn't bring animals with them. So there was a place there where you could buy animals locally and have them sacrificed for you. If you remember, Jesus upturned the tables on the money changers that were in the court of the Gentiles. And the reason for that was that when you came to the temple, no matter where you came from, your money was no good. You had to use temple currency. So you had to convert your currency to temple currency in order to buy these animals to be sacrificed, to give tithing to the temple for maintenance of the temple and so forth. That's what Jesus upturned the money changers, because they were violating his father's house, if you remember that. So I thought that was kind of interesting in the intent. However, in further researching it, what I found is that God used it for a different reason. God used it as a place for Gentiles to be exposed to Jews who worshiped there, because they wore certain clothes when they came. If they came in grief and all, they wore sackcloth and so forth. So the idea was that it created an area or a space for Gentiles to express themselves to Jews, and for a place for them to cross-reference and ask Jews questions. So it was kind of a place where if you go there often enough, you're going to have some thoughts in mind that you don't understand and you want to have clarified. And so by bringing the Gentiles near, you could not go into the inner sanctum of the temple, but you could be an outsider somewhat on the inside. So anyway, I thought that was, for me anyway, it was kind of an interesting thing. So this first Gentile prediction is a prediction that talks about Luke 21 in the times of the Gentiles. Noah's referencing the character that would be exhibited by each of his three sons as fathers of the races that were going to repopulate the earth. So let's take a look at that. He said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, who shall he be to his brothers." He had three sons, remember, Canaan, Shem, and Japheth. He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." So Canaan is going to be a servant of servants and to his brother, and he's going to reverse that and have the God of Shem let Canaan be his servant. Let Canaan be the servant of the God of Shem. then may God enlarge Japheth and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. So he's making some remarks here in this prophecy about the three different inheritances, three different bloodlines of his three sons. And we're going to talk about that in more detail. So yeah, when they split up, when God dispersed them and they split up, this is how they split up. Ham went to Africa. They were the darker people. Japheth went to Europe. They were the more olive complexion people. And Shem went to Asia, which were more of a yellow creation, or yellow complexion people. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. That's from the dispersal of the Tower of Babel. All right. Now, there was a second Gentile prediction, and the second prediction is about the judgments on the nations that are adjacent to Israel, that is, i.e., the Arab nations around Israel. And he identifies those, as we read earlier: Babylon and Chaldea, Moab, Damascus, Egypt, and so forth. So those show up like here, and those are the verses that are directly related to those. Okay?
Hey, Dan, I got a question.
Sure.
Does the Bible say anything about the three sons that they were of those colors?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it does. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to talk about that in the details. So hang on to that question, okay? If I don't cover it, bring it back up to me then.
All right.
And that's a very good question. All right. All right. So now, in reference to the times of the Gentiles, the problem that we have is in the idea of the translation of the original text. And so it gets a little confusing when you have the times of the Gentiles and then times and seasons, which is another term that's used. And times and season refer to the relationship of God with Israel. Times of the Gentiles is the relationship of the Gentiles to God. And it's both of which are reasoned by who controls the temple, who controls Jerusalem. So it would be normal, if that's the case, and it is, it would be normal to assume God would continue in that vein, and continuing in that vein is continuing in the vein of who controls what. And it's in whose control is whose time it is. Okay? All right. Now, the judgments, one of the different judgments of the Gentile nations, there's a stupendous event that's anticipated in the Old Testament about it. There's as you see on the bottom left, Psalm, Isaiah, Joel, Zephaniah, Zechariah, the references to those are the reference to the judgment of the Gentile nations. I just printed out Isaiah for you, Isaiah 63, which is shown at the bottom left. But the things I want to point out to you is that he talks about Edom in crimson, and he talks about it in red, your apparel in red. The interesting thing about it is, do you know who the founder of Edom was?
No.
It was Esau. Okay. You remember who Esau was?
Jacob and Esau.
Right. He was twin brother of Jacob. However, there was a distinguishing feature of Esau, and he was referred to as the red man because of the color of his complexion when he was born. So when he says, "For who is this who comes from Edom in crimson garments?" Crimson garments would be reference to the outer covering, you know. And he says, "What is your apparel red? Why is your apparel red?" The idea being is that coming from Edom is authentic. He's referring here to being an authentic from the line of Esau, all right, which would be a Gentile. Because from the line of Jacob would be what? A Jew, right? Right? So what do you think are considered biblically? What do you think the Arabs are considered?
Oh, I don't know. The Arabs were the sons of Ishmael.
Ishmael. Yeah.
Correct. But what do you think they're considered? They're not considered Jews, right?
No.
So if they're not considered Jews, what's the other consideration?
Gentiles, right?
Yeah, they're Gentiles.
Okay.
They're Gentiles. So in what we're reading and what we're studying here in the tribulation is that the sons of Jacob, right, who we know are Jews, and who's the other son? Esau,
Esau.
right? They only have two lines as far as God's concerned. You have Jews and you have Gentiles. And the Jews actually came from the Gentiles. In the relationship God had with Abraham, that's when they began as being the chosen people, right?
Mhm.
So in Isaiah 63, he talks about the day of vengeance and the year of redemption had come. He said, "I trampled down the peoples in my anger. I made them drunk in my wrath, and I poured out their lifeblood on the earth." He's talking about the judgment of the Gentiles, and he's talking about what happens to many of them in the tribulation. They're either happened under natural disasters, the pouring out, the bowls of wrath that are poured out, right? Or they happen in war. And the war shows up in the second half of the tribulation. All right. Then the Gentile nations of the lake of fire, Matthew 25, this is from Jesus himself. "Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire and prepared for the devil and his angels.'" That would be what? The great white throne judgment, right?
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So prophecy foretells about the Gentile nations in the kingdom that they're going to have a share in Israel's kingdom. So when we talk about it, Israel, this is Israel's kingdom. We're talking about what happens to time, the management of time, and what happens in the 7 years is directly related to the Jews being the ones that are calling those shots, because that's who Satan is in attack for. He's trying to eliminate the Jews, kill them all, eliminate them. He thinks that he can do that. And the Gentiles, on the other hand, will be coming, some will be coming to salvation and become believers because of the efforts of the Jews, whether it's the two Jewish prophets that preached during the first half of the tribulation and are killed and resurrected, or it's because of one-on-one evangelism by the Jews, and that spreads itself. It's the church starting all over again. What
Mhm.
you're seeing here is is the Old Testament being played out differently. We're starting over again. The chosen people are those chosen for the 144,000 remnant. So we're starting over again.
Mhm.
And they are charged with the same task of representing God to the Gentile nations that they were originally when they became Jews and they became heirs from Abraham. So you see this being played out again. It's a second chance. If I say, do we have a second chance? You have a second chance before death, not after death, but you do before death. So this is a second chance, and the reason why we're looking at this because this is a collectiveness. This is the nations being called together, people being called together.
Mhm.
All nations, all tongues is what it tells you. In Matthew 25, it asserts the entrance of Gentiles into the kingdom is by the authority of the king, and it's been predetermined by the Father. So they don't have to become Jews to enter into the kingdom.
Mhm.
Now, the last 7 years, which are the times and the seasons, would we say that was Israel, right?
Mhm.
So there's a realignment of nations that constitute the final form of the fourth world empire, which is made up of 10 different parts. Daniel. The head will be the blasphemer. A persecutor will continue for 3.5 years. Their covenant with Israel will restore their sovereignty, but the covenant is going to be broken. The world leader will invade Palestine and set up his headquarters there in Jerusalem. He will be judged at the return of the Lord, and the destruction of the leader and his host will redeem Jerusalem from Gentile dominion. That's the end of the times of the Gentiles. This deliverance takes place in the second advent of the Messiah. Okay? So the final form of Gentile power is in Revelation 13 and Revelation 17. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So we'll get to that. In Daniel 2, it talks about 4 successive empires that hold dominion over Palestine. We've already talked about those. And the outgrowth of the fourth empire is the Roman Empire, Daniel 2:41, 42. It's marked by division, a weak federation, but strong autocratic and democratic rule. There will be a remarkable union of 2 contradictory conditions, a universal head of the empire with individual kings over their particular domains. Now that's a contradiction of terms and conditions. How can you be a ruler and still subject yourself to a rule? You can only do that by coalition. So this starts by coalition, and then we see that the Antichrist either kills or dispossesses two of the 10 kings. The third king submits to him. So now he has the 3 kings that he has control over, and he allows the other ones to remain control over their nations if they are subject to his rule. That's what we refer to as the Roman Empire. Yeah. Okay. So Daniel 7, the course of the powers revealed through the 4 beasts. The singular thing about the 4th beast was that it had 10 horns, 10 kings over 10 kingdoms, which come out of the great world kingdom. There'll be one individual having control over the whole dominion of the 10 kings. All right. So what's the point? Why do I need to know this stuff? Well, let's try to figure that out. tribulation involved, wait a minute, now it's playing games with me again. The tribulation involves the nations. When it refers into Revelation, especially about the nations, it is referring to the Gentile nations. The church has left. Israel's now back in their preferred people position, and we get to start over again. God's judgment is being raised from a whisper to a roar. And if I know how it begins, and I know how we got here, and I know how it will end, I can better understand God's plan, especially God's plan for me, because then that tells me, where do I fit? What are they describing about me? Well, they're describing I'm a Gentile. That's where they're describing, but I'm a believing Gentile.
Mhm.
So I'm a convert from that. So because of that, I've escaped the wrath. So you can begin to put yourself in that position once you understand what God is saying that he's doing here. There's a nugget here in this session that's just for me, where I am right now. If I look hard enough, if I think deep enough, if I pray long enough, you're going to get the great aha. So intermission is over. The final act is about to begin. The end times are right around the corner from us. All right, so let's look at the details now. Now you can ask your serious questions here. All right. All right, so this is Herod's temple, and Herod's temple describes for us the Jewish approach to dealing with Gentiles. You see that the Gentile courtyards inside the outer walls of the temple, but it's not inside the temple. As you can see, where those places are numbered: holy place, the altar, priest courtyard, so forth, Israelites courtyard. So it's an outsider who are inside, but they're not insiders, so to speak.
Mhm.
All right. You all knew already, right? Yeah, you did. Okay. So now we get into the action role, and hopefully we're going to come to your answer your question that you asked earlier. Noah's sons are laborers of the ark. They worked with their dad in what they're doing. So if you are trying to put your perspectives together from the time frame, is that what you want to look at here is that we're going to be looking at the flood, where God started over again with the people, the repopulation of those people from the sons of Noah, and then they collectively become to build the Tower of Babel, and then God changes that. He intervenes in that. So you see where that is. We don't know the exact time. We just know somewhere around 2100 BC. So somewhere in that 100-year period of time, from that time to the time that Abraham is born, is when the dispersal was. So, you okay with that, guys? Any questions? Now we're going to talk about the dispersal, confusion of the language, and a physical displacement. He sends them outward from that. Here's kind of the framework on the time frame to give you that perspective again. Creation, flood, Tower of Babel, Abraham. All right. All right. Now, the Ham, Shem, and Japheth, Shem being the one that we identify with because it's in his bloodline that the Messiah comes, the Savior comes. So the Semitic people are the Jews and the Arabs, even though the Arabs are Gentiles. They're not They're Semitic, but they're not Jews. And why would they be Semitic people, do you think? Come on.
Does it have to do with this son of oh
Abraham.
yeah, son of Abraham by another woman.
Right, right, right. He was my brother by another mother,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, right. So you've got the other two who are polytheists. Isn't that interesting? And when you read in Revelation and you read in Daniel, you see these names come up: Gomer, Magog, Tubal, Meshach, Gomer, Cush, Put, all of those. Those are the names of the nations. Named after sons of the sons, so to speak, or grandsons of the sons. So in the world system, under Ham, which is polytheist, there was Babylon, Egypt, North Africa, Syria, and Jordan. So before I get to it further, what would you say would be the color of their complexion?
Which ones, Dan?
This is under Ham,
Ham?
with Babylon, Egypt, North Africa, Syria, and Jordan.
Oh, Jordan.
Black.
Yeah, at least for sure a darker
Darker
complexion.
complexion people.
Yeah. Under Japheth, however, going to Europe, Russia, and Iran and Iraq being separate, what would you say that their predominant complexion would be?
Olive.
Olive. Very good. Very good. What would you say the color of the complexion would be for Shem?
White.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's see if that holds to be true for my friend over here.
An olive color.
Wait a minute, we're still going. Oh, hang on.
All right.
We're going to get closer.
You throw me a curveball.
Yeah, I'm not throwing him a curveball. Yeah. As a matter of fact, when you look up the names of some of these, the names identify the color, by the way, when you look them up. Okay. They identify them. And some even identify themselves as black or yellow. Now, the black and the yellow are our translations of those words. So, we have something to do with that. But when you look at where they went and where they were, think about that for a minute. If you went to Africa and you were in Africa all the time, you would probably get, after several layers of sunburn from the desert even, okay, you're going to start to change color there, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, these are the generations, and you can look these up yourself. I'm going to send you this, so you'll have those to look up. So again, let's go back to our timeline here and take a look at where we are. I took the ones that you already had. Antichrist has appearances of a mortal wound. They're in the gray. I'm trying to get away from that to point up to you what the additionals are, because we've added the Gentiles to it. Here are the additionals. The two prophets that began their preaching and witnessing ministry. Who are they going to be preaching to, do you think? The two prophets. Who are they preaching to?
Oh, they're preaching to unbelieving Israel and the Gentiles, right?
Unbelieving Gentiles, right? Both of them, because it says to us that they will be seen by all the nations and all the people.
Hmm.
That means, some kind of world projection, which it seems to be like the internet or something similar to the internet, where everybody can. So they're going to be preaching to both of those. Okay. So if we look at the Jews being below the line and the Gentiles being above the line, or vice versa, I guess, if you wanted to look at that, then God is not differentiating between the two. He's going to differentiate between the two when the 144,000 Jews, because preaching is only one form of evangelism. The 144,000 Jews spread out to all the nations, or sent out to all the nations. That's when the grassroots is going to happen. That's when the evangelism is going to happen. Just like the church, the mission to these guys is the same mission that was given to the church: carry the gospel to all people.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're going to have a believing Israel that will be witnessing for the Messiah, and you're going to have an unbelieving Israel who is not going to do anything of that fashion because they're deceived by the false prophet and they fall into apostasy from their own faith. Okay. Then the two witnesses are killed. So the two witnesses are killed. Who does that set up a cease and desist with? It is the Jews, right? The Jews. Now you're going to decide who you are. You're either going to be a believing Jew, Messianic Jew, or you're going to be an unbelieving Jew. The division happens in the Jewish faith. What about the Gentiles? What about the Gentiles? It kind of refers to us, it implies to us when it talks about they're going to be exchanging gifts amongst each other, just like it was Christmas. For some reason that I haven't myself figured out, you guys are smarter than me. Maybe you have figured it out, but why would they be so happy over the two witnesses being killed?
Well, on scripture, it refers that they're glad to see these two gone because they were a threat to their belief or to their following of
Right.
the Antichrist.
Yeah, very good. So they're going to be, the two witnesses are going to be total opposite of the world religion that will be then taking place and forming. That's number one. So they become a nuisance because what are they going to be doing? They're going to be saying, that's false. That's not true. That's a lie. So they're going to become a nuisance to the false prophet, right? And to that false religion. Well,
Yes.
what else are they going to be? They're going to be the igniter of what really ticks off the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is going to take it out on the people. So by the witnesses being gone, there's a hope that some of the things that have happened are not going to happen anymore, and the people are going to have some sort of relief from that. Because during the first half of the tribulation is when the reference is said to wars and rumors of wars, pestilence, famine. This is the pouring out of the woes. There's a lot of natural disasters that happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we get to the midpoint, and that's when the Antichrist imitates that. He imitates that. Here they are. The two witnesses are killed. Their bodies are laying in the street for 3 days. Then they're raised up. So there's this appearance of a mortal wound to the Antichrist, and then he is raised up in 3 days. Also, the great imitator, the great deceiver, has now shown or appear to show what he can do. So it's kind of like, you think about it, it's kind of like the priest in Egypt imitating Moses to Pharaoh. You know, he throws his staff out, turns into a snake. They throw their staffs out, turns into a snake. But there's certain things that they can't do. That's showing who is really the true God. It's not just a magician's magic or deception.
Mhm.
So now what happens is that the Antichrist shows his true colors. He violates and he destroys, tears up the agreement of peace with Israel. He now does not allow them to have any more sacrifices in the temple. He ups the ramp of persecution of the Jews, especially the believing Jews. And this is where God tells the Jews to flee from the land, flee from Jerusalem. Remember, he talks about you better pray and hope that you're not pregnant. Pray and hope that you're not this and you're not that. It'll be difficult for you to get out into the wilderness. But God has prepared a place for them. So the second half of the tribulation is what is referred to as the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24, especially. Now, halfway through the second half of the Great Tribulation, or the second half of the tribulation, is where our Armageddon campaign battles begin to happen.
Mhm.
Okay, you with that? All right. Now, let's go to the
Yeah.
full. Yeah.
Last question, Dan. If back up one slide. At what point, and this is one thing I disagreed with Pastor Hemrick on in the video that you suggested we look at. The war with Russia and Iran against Israel, along with all the other countries. At what part of the first half of the tribulation is
Well, if you remember, we talked about go back over to the beginning of the tribulation. You see at the bottom below the screen,
Yeah.
it says Russia and Iran, Arab coalition invade Israel.
Oh, I see it. I see it. Yeah, I couldn't see it there for a while.
Yeah.
I see it. Yeah, yeah.
It's
Okay.
Ezekiel 36 and 37.
Now, Pastor Hamrick said that it was his belief, which is counter to the two books I just read and the other videos I've looked at, that he takes the Russian-Iran Arab coalition all the way into the Great Tribulation.
Mhm.
They're
And-
going to be reassembled. Okay. Let me show you. And let me get to, let's get over here to where we are. Look under the Northern Confederation. Who do you have there?
You got Russia and you got Iran.
Yeah.
Russia.
So they're not going to be eliminated by that war. Their armies are going to be greatly destroyed by that, because God supernaturally is going to prevent them from accomplishing what they want to accomplish.
But which leads me to an observation. We had some you've got some very, very stubborn people. I mean, after the rapture and millions or billions of people taken up to heaven, and then you've got the war here where God intervenes and shows all the Jews that that God is real and Jesus is real, and they still won't believe.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
kind of mind-boggling, isn't it?
Mhm.
Kind of like the way it is right now. Here's the thing to me, why I think what we're showing here is correct is because in this first one, you see my cursor here?
Yeah.
In the first one, Russian Iran coalition, okay, they're led by local national leaders. In the second one, which is in this one, under the Northern Confederation. They're led by the Antichrist.
Mm.
So that makes a big difference. Okay. And so this one is where it accumulates itself in the campaign of Armageddon. Right?
Okay.
Now you guys see how these things line up here? The thought is that the revised Roman Empire, okay, the
Yeah.
revised Roman Empire, it is really a misnomer because they never went away. They just went down in influence and down in power. Some of the nations of the Roman Empire did, but they've still always been there. The difference is that they now become together in this 10 nation federation of nations. Okay.
Okay.
And the kings of the East, I mean, you can look the verses up for yourself. I mean, there they are.
There seems to be a difference of opinion too about the United States participation in these wars.
Right.
What,
But
what-
where
what's your-
would you think they would fit in here?
if at all, in the first? But again, I haven't seen anything or any proof stated in the Bible about it. This is just opinion by some pastors about the United States weakened as a world power and that eventually joins into the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Well, my take on it is when I look at let's look at the Northern Confederacy. How could that be assembled? How could the coalition of those nations be assembled? Because we're talking about one of the big players. The big players of the world right now are Russia, China, the United States. The second tier would be the other nuclear nations, which I think Iran is, if they're not there, they're right behind there. North Korea, India, Pakistan. Okay. So I think the Northern Confederation, the only way that can be put together, because look how far reaching it is. Germany and Turkey are included in that. Well, you see the relationship that Russia has now with Turkey. You see the relationship Russia now has with Iran. And what kind of relationship do they have in Germany? They furnished the power for Germany.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
what a coincidence.
yeah.
You know, that those countries would be specifically named to be involved together in some form or fashion. Okay, so now what about China? Well, China falls under the kings of the East. Okay, there are the nations that would come from the east of the Euphrates. And what does it say? It says the Euphrates is going to dry up, which means an army is able to mobilize itself and come across. Right? So the kings of the South are the Africans. So the only place that leaves for America geographically would be in the Roman Empire. But it would not be as a first tier nation. And the only way that these things are able to be assembled is because of a lack of a national power on the international scene to prevent it from happening. Who holds the iron hand glove? Who holds that there? America does. Because of the technology of its war machine, because the power of its currency and international currency, because of its influence in NATO. I mean, we're the policemen of the world, are we not?
Yeah.
So if we were not that and we didn't exist there, then they're free to do this. And so to me, it makes perfect sense as that America would be lessened in its power and influence to give freedom to have these things which would be naturally coming together. There's going to be reasons why these things come together, as far as just like we described Germany and Turkey is another one. It's because somebody controls something that holds the power over that other country. And right now, it looks like Russia. I think personally, besides wanting to have a land bridge from Russia at its front door, I think what he wants is he wants the nuclear power plants and he wants the uranium resources from the Ukraine. And I think he wants to cut the food supply off by taking the seaports away so that they can't ship food to Africa and some of the other nations. So what is he? He controls half the world that way.
Mhm.
I mean, the Ukraine is positioned where, if I am informed correctly, right now they're furnishing 30% of the electrical and gas power to Europe, 30% of all of Europe. And they're virtually 100% to Germany. So what do you think they are to Poland? Probably the same. That's what these pipelines that they've opened up that come down. That's crazy for us to have allowed that. It's crazy.
Mhm.
It's just giving them an open door. And so, I think they're probably doing those things. It doesn't tell us how or what, but I think we're in our own demise. It used to be that everything was handled through America or America controlled bureaucracy. The money exchange was all based on the US dollar.
Mhm.
It's not anymore. It's getting away from that. We don't control that anymore. We used to control the internet. We gave that away, so we don't control communications anymore. We're giving up our control of everything centrally coming through this country. And so you give up your control, you've also those people are going to look somewhere else. So I hope that answered your question, Norm.
Yep, thank you very much.
And I know it was long drawn out, but that's the soapbox question. So that allowed me to elevate myself in that capacity. Okay. And any other questions that you got here?
Well, one thing is that the Antichrist, he becomes a world leader and he promises Israel 7-year peace, right?
Yeah.
Now, does he have any influence on slowing down the Russian coalition that initially goes against Israel?
Well, see, I think that's why I have the timing where I have it set up. Let me go back. That's why I have that.
Yeah.
Because I think they do that prior to the signing of the peace pact. I believe that that's why Israel signs the peace pact.
To protect themselves against this Russian-Iran coalition.
Yeah, I think we know from the Bible that there's a supernatural deflection of this coalition by God.
Okay.
But somewhere along the way, if he controls the propaganda machine, if he controls the way that this is spelled out, somewhere along the way, he's going to take credit for that.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's going to blind the nations into believing that he's the one that did that. And that would be what would prompt Israel, because they would think he had the power.
Okay.
So it would be a natural thing for them to say, well, let's come. He'll say, I did it. I'll do it again. So let's sign a peace pact here, and you can have peace in your country.
Okay. Yeah.
So the timing of everything is like like threads in a fabric. You know, they're independent, but they come together,
Yeah.
and then they form something different altogether. Anybody else?
Dan,
Yeah.
I thought that the rapture of the church is what precipitates the demise of America, because most of our military people are Christians. Most of all of our intelligent people are Christians, and so we take them away. There's not much left.
Okay. Well, you know, I would certainly hope you're correct, Terry. However, what I see happening is I see the apostasy of the church happening, and I see people that declare themselves as Christians don't really fulfill the definition of a Christian. You know, they don't really do that, and the numbers, those that populate those categories seem to be on the decline, just like church attendance is on the decline.
Mhm.
You know, it used to be that 70% or something like that of the people in America were declared, or they declared that they were Christian, they were followers, and of those 70%, 55% of them said that they were believers and were born again. You know, now the numbers, if you look under Barna at the real numbers, it's more like 30 to 35% are born again,
Wow.
and it's progressing to where lower than 50% even declare themselves. You know what? There are two things that are on the rise in America as far as religion is concerned, and that is the Muslim nation and the nuns. Those people that answer none to the religion questions. So, you know, I would think that you would hope that you were correct as far as the population of our Christian brothers and sisters, but I am seriously beginning to doubt that, because I think it's on the true is going to want away from us and get away from us. Yeah, I could see where people are raptured that are in key positions of the military, the guys that push the button, you know, would be gone. However, it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible that I've found that there's any country demised because of the rapture. There are some that are impeded or damaged, you know, obviously, but not in demise because of it. I think that, you know, that there's got to be a reason for it. How is this guy who's rising to power going to explain the rapture? Well, from what I've read and seen, you know, he's going to say, well, it's alien kidnappings, you know, or something along those lines. We might think they're bizarre, but then on the other hand, there was a series on public education network and one of the other syndicated networks on aliens and, you know, UFOs and all that kind of stuff. And man, it was like 80 million people watched those things, and there was a series like eight of those.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's people that are being prepared mentally and they're buying into it, you know. So you know,
Yeah.
what's these signs of the times and birth pangs? These things are gradually increased, just like birth pangs do, until they reach a crescendo. And I think the crescendo that they reach is when the Russian Iran Arab coalition invades Israel. So I think a lot of these things are hand in glove. They fit together, but they don't reach their peak momentum till much later. So as the Antichrist and as Satan's come up, the believers and Jesus's followers go down. It's kind of the great deceiver. That's what he is, and that's what he does.
Okay.
Does that help any, Terry?
Yes, thanks.
Anybody else? Dave, you're awful quiet over there. Share some of your wisdom with us.
Dave who?
Dave Lehman. Yeah. Oh, you're muted there, buddy. Oh, you almost made it. Try it again.
Well,
There you
I'm
go.
having trouble clicking it off for some reason. That's
There you go.
causing a problem. I'm not sure I'm smart enough or know enough to ask a question right now, but
What do you see in here that you believe or you don't believe?
well, I don't know. It's just hard for me to see how it all ties together. Like, I guess just on a quick overview like this. So don't know that I disbelieve anything or totally buy in. I'm just, trying to
Yeah.
evaluate.
But if you have another thought pattern or thought, share that with us. I mean, I'm speculating just like everybody else is, but to me, I put these in positions because to me, they appear that one leads to another, that leads to another. They're interlocking. And because this happened, then it's easy to see that the next thing is how that happens and how that takes place. But,
Mhm.
I am, like I say, I'm not, this is like, for instance, the mark of the beast. I mean, for a long time, I thought the mark of the beast happened when the 7-year tribulation started. It doesn't happen till the mid-trib.
Mm.
And it is when he has total control of everything, the economics, the political, the religious, when he's got everything, that's when it happens. All right. How about the 4 world powers? Does that satisfy everybody? All right.
Yep.
Okay. So here's another way of describing it for you. The Northern Confederation, the kings of the East and kings of the South, and the revised Roman Empire. Believe it or not, it tells us pieces here, pieces there of scripture that each one of these at one time or another, they disagree with the legitimacy of the power and the control of the Roman Empire, which is controlled by the Antichrist. They challenge that at first, but then they succumb to it later. So he doesn't take over these necessarily by power. The only one he takes over by power is the revised Roman Empire, and that's by the King 1 and King 2. He takes them over by power. King 3, there's a conflict, but he ultimately wins that. And then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, they willingly join the coalition. I don't know if it's out of fear. I don't know if it's out of necessity because he controls the food or he controls the energy. I don't know how that works. I just know that it does. That's the way it works, but I don't know the cause of that.
Mhm.
Okay. So when you read and you look at the Meshach, Rosh, Tubal, you see what nations those are. I mean, there's a long drawn out explanation of who and why and what were they, where were they when they were labeled, who were they at the time, what were they identified with, because they later, many generations later is when we're into who Ethiopia is and who Germany is, and they're not labeled differently now. but the geography is still the same. All right. Okay. So just in case you need advice, you got my 2 cents worth. And that's about what it's worth. Next week, we're going to talk about the Armageddon campaign. And that'll be part 8.
Cool.
Just to give you an idea here, just to whet your appetite, this is what is envisioned as the format of how they go about it and what they do. The Star of David is in the middle, that's Israel. When you put Israel in the center of the world, that's where they are. So it shows that Israel is completely surrounded, by a unified force, in essence. So
Yeah.
I'll give you that thought. Okay. All right. So we'll stop the sharing here. All right. So now, what do you get out of it? Where are we going in this thing, guys? I'm kind of take it piecemeal and then lump it together for you, so that what are we saying here? What's it all about? What is happening in our world today? What's it all about? Well, you can say, well, it's about this and it's about that. Now you still got to keep the same perspective. It is about what God is doing, because God is always doing something. He's always perfecting his plan. He's moving his plan along. And that plan is the ultimate plan for his kingdom to be on this earth and to bring to himself as many as he possibly can, in love and in compassion, but he has to do it in a just fashion. He cannot indiscriminately wink his eye and forget about sin. There has to be a cooperative effort here. And so
I think you've just laid it all out for us, Dan, and it's very simple and become very understandable now.
good. I'm glad to hear that. Let's see. All right. So we're going to do Armageddon next, right?
Right.
What areas of the end times do you guys have difficulty with? I want to make sure I cover everything that you want, you need.
What area?
Yeah,
Getting through it.
Huh? Getting through it?
Getting through it.
Yeah. Well, I
We'll just
hope
learn.
I'm not around to be through it.
Yeah, just learning about it, what it's going to be. Well, you're telling us what it's going to be about.
Yeah, and it's hopefully something that you can pass on to the next generation, right? Right?
I'm going to let you do that.
Yeah.
Dan,
Yeah.
maybe. Let me ask a question. You've done in-depth study on this, and it's extremely revealing. Not only interesting, but revealing, and I'm sure it's foundationally correct. Where are we with respect to the end time? I mean, Russia has got a lunatic in charge that could bring the end time now, as far as launching missiles involving the other nations that would be on their side. It would appear that Putin is in the forefront of bringing the end time soon. Now, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. What do you think?
Well, I from what I heard you say, Bill, it sounds like that you think that there's going to be an ultimate demise of America, uh, which means that you think nuclear assault is going to happen on the territory of America. Is that what I'm hearing you say? When you
Well,
refer to
he's
end
got-
times?
Yeah, I think he could collect Iran and maybe even China and so forth and start a nuclear war easily against the United States and the rest of us. And that's the end time right there.
For us,
Well, you're, let's just say you would say that's the end of our time. Is that what you're saying? Because the end times, I mean, that's why I'm going through this whole program
Yeah,
is it's not instantaneous. It's a 7-year program. Once it begins, then you can't stop the momentum. Once the tribulation starts, you can't stop it. It's all rolling downhill. So how do we get there? That's the question. And you know, I don't know what our demise is. You know, I don't think it takes Russia. I think North Korea has the capabilities of a a nuclear weapon in the upper atmosphere that would fry everything we had here and would destroy our economic. Let me look at the economics of America after 9/11. Just that one event of two towers coming down, and the economics. How long did it take us, man? It took us several years for us to recover from that economically,
Yeah.
right? Militarily, right? So if we are being led to reduce our technical advantage militarily, then we lose the ability to threaten anybody. You know, why are people threatened by us right now? We don't have the largest standing army in the world. They're threatened by us because of our technology. That's why they're threatened by us militarily. I mean, why do you think Ukraine? That's what Ukraine wants from us is our military weapons and stuff. Why do you think they want these killer drones? Why do you think they want these drones? Why do you think they want rocket launchers that can kill a tank from 2.5 miles away? You know, that's what they want to defend themselves. You know, look back. Let me remind you of something here. Russia invaded Afghanistan, originally.
Yeah.
You know, and as a matter of fact, there was a movie made about it. I forget what the name of it. Somebody's war. A congressman got funded and stuff. We started supplying stuff to the Afghans, and they held Russia off.
Hmm.
You remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we did. We gave them rocket launchers, and they shot down helicopters, and
Yeah.
that's what they did. It was our technology that used a nation who had bows and arrows were able to defend their country. Then they turned those things on us.
Yeah.
That's what's so bizarre. Why would we leave, $30 billion worth of military equipment into them? I saw a program just yesterday where they're talking about the bad guys in Afghanistan. And they're showing these guys in Afghanistan now walking around in our uniforms.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to see them, man. They were ragheads before. Now they're, man,
Yeah. We're in
they
our
got-
fatigues.
they
Military
got the
fatigues.
night vision goggles and all this stuff, So
Yeah.
and I think we're more exposed now than we've ever been. But if our threat still remains, why would North Korea shoot a missile up and have an electromagnetic impulse spread and destroy half of the United States. If we were going to send a nuke over and there would be no more North Korea. You know, that, what do you think is preventing Russia from doing it? You know, what, that's why the race is on for Iran to do it. Yeah, they wanted to, for a regional nuclear for Israel, but they also wanted to participate in the Big Daddy war and participate. If they've got nuclear weapons, we're not so inclined to go after them with nuclear weapons. I mean, think about it. India. Are you kidding me? You know, but India's got the second largest standing army in the world. Wow. So Pakistan is number 3. So
Yeah.
I think we've always been vulnerable, and I think the power that we have, you know, is I don't know. I'm not a techno guy, but I would say that it wouldn't be very long, far removed, where we could have satellites going around with lasers and be able to do some terrible destructive things to people, so that even if they did blow us up, they would have to blow up the satellites all at the same time. See, I think there's more to ringing the world that Elon Musk is doing. He's ringing the world in satellites, and I think it's more to it than just making them communication satellites and GPS signaling and all that. I think there's some weaponry that goes along with it. Not that he's doing it, but you know, he's the carrier for everybody. So
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot. There's a lot in our we don't understand because we don't know. We're not privy to the meetings, and we're not privy to truly what's going on. They put the national security label on it. We don't find out about it till 40 years later. Another generation finds out, and that other generation doesn't care. So, because it didn't happen when they were there. So, you know, Bill, to answer this long answer to your question, but I don't, you know, I don't see that happening. I see us destroying ourselves, to be honest with you. That's what I see happening.
What's the old expression? Ignorance is bliss. I think if we ignore some of the things that we've been talking about, we're asking for it. There's a lot of technology we don't know about. I have a good friend, you know him, Dan, but he worked for one of the major technological companies over in New Mexico. There's a lot of things that he worked on that he can't talk about, and that was 20 years ago. The technology that was developed then has greatly expanded since then. He's not told me because he said he was forbidden to tell anybody about the technology he worked on. 20 years later, I can't even imagine what's going on now. The thing that concerns me is you have someone with the wherewithal that Putin, as head of Russia, could get a hold of some of that and turn it loose without consideration of the ramifications of it. China's the same way. Now, you know, those are the things that bother me when you have someone with Putin's mindset. He seems to be different than China. I don't know why. Maybe it's because we seem to hear more about him and he's more open about it. But we got those in there, and those are some of the players in what you just went over as far as the end times. They're in that part of the world.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's all kinds of things subversively that are happening. You know, I recently read and I saw some evidence of it, that there have been 10 fires or explosions of food processing plants in America in the last 6 months? 10, you know?
Wow.
So what does that mean? And what it says is what I've heard anyway, is that people do a lot of things differently and abandon a lot of beliefs when they're hungry. You know, so if somebody were to attack our food supply, you know, and you can attack a food supply more than just plague of locusts on the grounds. You can affect it by not being able to get your product to the market. Go see the shelves in the grocery store right now and try to get baby food.
Yeah,
You
baby
can't.
food shortage.
You know, it's not there. Formula's not there. So I think it's a series of things that is happening. And I think it is by a series of people that's happening. I hate to say Russia, but I think Russia's involved. I think China's involved because they're the players that have to gain the most by the demise of the United States.
Mm.
They're the ones that gain the most. They and our media oligarchs. You know, in the last 20 years, we have had more billionaires created than in the last 1,000 years. And you look at I saw the other day a report, the top 10 richest people in the world, 8 of them are from this country.
Hmm.
And so when you can afford to pay $350 million to put out a series of people in one state that just so happened to work for the election commission, that says a lot. When you can just throw away $350 million,
Yeah.
you can get a lot done. And if it was tainting the food supply, if it was tainting our water supply, I mean, those are the things that are basic to life, you
Mhm.
know. Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do? We're fat cats, man. We're used to turning the spigots on and everything comes out and it's all great. Flushing the commode and it goes away. What if it didn't?
Yeah. Very
Now
inconvenient.
what do you do? You know, it's a whole different change.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but I'm not sure what the millennials would do. You know, I think somebody asked me in the past week what I thought the difference was in 3 generations removed from mine, and I said that I thought there was 2 things. One was that generation had no draft; there was no military draft, and secondly, you know, was that everybody got a trophy. So that's not reality, and that's not what this country was based on.
Mhm.
If this country was so bad, why does everybody want in?
Yeah, right.
You know, the one thing that America has always had that's been the attraction is opportunity. This country gives opportunity. I got picked up by the airport by a driver the other day. This guy was from India. All right. And I said, well, why did you come here? He said, to make a living. I couldn't make a living in India. I can make a living here.
Yeah.
It was, what do you do? He said, I drive and I cook. He has 2 jobs.
Mm.
He works at a restaurant 4 hours a day, cooking food for him. Once he prepares all the food, he gets out, gets in his car, picks people up at the airport and drives them around. You know, that's what he does.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how are you doing with that? He said, I'm supporting 4 sisters from my wife's side of the family who we brought over from India and 2 brothers who I brought over here from India.
Wow.
So, well, you're doing pretty good, buddy. You know,
That's amazing.
so you disrupt that, you know, people will stop coming. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about securing your borders. They'll stop coming because there's no difference between our country and their country. They won't come.
Right.
If you can't get fed here, they ain't coming, buddy.
Mhm.
They're not coming here to be starved to death, I can tell you.
Right.
So
Yeah, this is the best country in the world still.
go tour the country, look at these other places. I mean, I've talked to too many people that I hear an accent from. Where are you from? I'm from Serbia. Or where are you from? Well, I'm from Nigeria. Where are you from? I'm from Trinidad. I said, well, when did you come here? How long you been here? What are you doing? Why did you come? They all have the same answer.
Mhm.
They all have the same answer.
Yep.
And you know what's really funny? I mean, this guy, that one of the things this guy said was, he said, God bless you. And I had already asked him if he was a Hindu, and he said, yeah, Hindus don't believe God's going to bless you. They don't believe that. But he's rubbed elbows with so many people. That's become a phrase that just means, I hope things will go well for you,
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
All right.
You asked for it. So you got it. Hey, let me turn the thing off, recording off here.